Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dewell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am your host, Jess Dewell. And for the last 20 years, it's actually been more than that, but for the last 20 years, I've worked with companies in an advising and in a consulting role, specifically around growth strategy. This concept of how to learn to ask the right questions and to think effectively on your feet in everyday situations that come up. Now, today's program is called Leverage Time. It is program 207. Can you believe that we're already here? We're at the end of February, 2 months into 2019. And what do we do now? What do we do with everything we were planning last October and last December and even maybe a week ago? Are we engaging with it on a regular basis? Are we using it to benefit what we're trying to do and get to where we're going with, still a journey, but the least bumps possible? And that comes up with how we leverage time. Because we all have 24 hours in a day, and our bodies do require sleep, even though several of you out there, maybe even many, many of you out there, have learned how to effectively burn the candle at both ends. We're still in this place where what we do with our time when it comes to business impacts our competitive advantage. It impacts the way that we lead, and it impacts the ability for us to navigate unexpected and difficult and challenging situations along the way. So in today's program, Leverage Time, we're talking about 6 different things that we're going to cover, and I'm going to break them into parts. The first half of the program, we're going to talk about 4 common ways to achieve growth. We're going to talk about the role of communication in that growth. And we're going to talk about what we prioritize. Because in the end, we have to have a mindset of resiliency. And this resilient mindset is what's going to allow us to jump, respond versus react, and be able to create time when there's seemingly no time so that we can do what we want to do the way we want to do it with the best integrity possible. Even if it's not necessarily the result we were looking for, we can use what happened, use the results that we get to move forward in an effective fashion. So we're going to start with Ansoff's matrix. For those of you who have heard me talk about this before, he is kind of one of my heroes. Some dude who was like, how do businesses grow, and did a lot of research and found that there were 4 main buckets. And just like personality tests, that started out with 4 types of personalities. You can have 16 or 32 or 64 subcategories of that, depending maybe on your industry, depending on how nuanced you are, depending on whether you're disrupting or not. And in the end, we're going to just take all those away and go back to the very basic, the basic 4. 4 ways that Ansoff described companies growing include market penetration, product development, market development, and diversification. So we'll link to one of his Matrix articles. They're all over the internet if you wanted to search for them, but we'll link to the one that I reference the most often, because that way you can see the source that I'm coming from and using in the basis for a lot of the work that I do. We're talking about growth strategy. We're talking about how do we want our company to grow? And when we know our mission and we know the values with which we are working together, it's easier to decide how to weight and prioritize what we want our growth strategy to be. Now, I say that like, we could just decide that today. Well, we really cannot decide that today. What we can decide is that we have a growth strategy, and we can decide that the growth strategy that we do have, if we've never written it down, we can write it down. There are many companies out here that are listening that have a business that does business and has clients and has a pipeline and is making money, yet there's no specific growth strategy. And so being able to look at what you have and saying, well, this is my growth strategy because this is how we do business today is a really important piece. Because when we're only looking at our business at an annual level at any one point in time, we miss what growth strategy has to offer. We start thinking a little more strategically. And for those of you out there with an active strategic plan already, the growth strategy is part of that. It's part of a strategic plan that a company uses to maintain its own relevance in the future, right? We want to grow. We want to have money. We want to do the things that we do well, being able to continue to be received and wanted by our customer base, the people, the customers, the companies, the organizations that we serve. So the 4 pieces, right? Existing markets, market penetration, and product development. New markets are the other bucket that we could go into, right? Market development or diversification. So for those of you, all of us already in business, is the work that we're doing and the markets that we're serving and the places that our sales are coming from, are they the people that we originally thought? Are they designed for the organizations that we said, this is the group of people, the product, the service that we want to serve, that we can help make their lives easier in some way or help them grow in some way? And this concept of new markets, what can you do? And a lot of us like to reinvent the wheel. And I'll tell you what, reinventing the wheel is hard. At the same point in time, we're not really reinventing the wheel, are we? When we're talking about new markets in a growth strategy of an existing company, we may be adding a service that somebody else already has. So it's new to us. It's our new wheel. But that wheel isn't new anywhere and everywhere. And so having that distinction is interesting to consider in relationship to competitive advantage, both deepening your existing market as well as what do you want to add to reach new markets for your organization. And something people forget when we're looking at existing markets and new markets is both take a lot of resources. A lot of resources. And when we're thinking about all of those resources, how do we decide what to use where, what to let go to free up resources for other things, and what to add, which may strain resources on existing programs and processes? And so I'm thinking about all of this when I was thinking about this program, Leverage Time, and what are we going to do to leverage time? And the only way we know for sure is to get out of our own heads and talk to other people, which moves us into the second part of the program, which is all about talking about our growth strategy. You know what you need to do in your role to succeed well today. My question becomes, do you know what goes well and what you need to do to be in the role that you want tomorrow? The way you communicate in your role to do a good job with the focus on where you're going tomorrow looks different than if you just do your job extremely well for the role that you're in. So knowing your own path, what is your personal strategy for your personal growth, your development growth, your career growth, and then aligning that with the company that you're a part of to do more work, to do better work, to do effective work with the time that we have. Because if we're all doing our own thing and we're not on the same page, when we're on the bus together, our bus will still get to where it's going. It's just going to be a lot more chaotic and a lot more difficult. And people may lose mittens and hats outside the windows of that bus. Who knows, right? You may not come out without a few scratches or holes in your clothes, which we don't want that either, because it's not a good use of time. And we are leveraging our time poorly. And so the purpose of communicating is to create shared meaning. When I know what I want and you know what you want, and we're able to talk about it together in such a way that allows us to not only understand each other, but understand how each other's actions, thoughts move us toward that goal, that growth that we are seeking, the better off our company is, the better off I am in that combination, and the better off you and I are together in that combination. Because it's through shared meaning, the way we do our work together, that makes us more efficient. So right off the bat, the investment of time that it takes to create shared meaning and decide how we work together here, what that looks like, and the ways that it shows up are a huge piece of leveraging time. It may not be an immediate win, but it's going to be a long-term win, because when the team does it, everything is amplified. Once upon a time, we called that compound interest on our bank. And I think too, compound interest still matters. It's just the amount of interest we get isn't necessarily as big as it used to be. And that's okay. We just go with the flow. And we do the best that we can, knowing that resources and awareness and who's all in and how they're in will change. And as leaders, and maybe we're not a leader, but we can be, because we know we're leading our own actions. We're leading the where we're at right now, where we want to go, and the way we can do it best, aligning our actions and our objectives personally with the company ones that we have been given. So, have you talked to your colleagues about your growth strategy? This is the other part of communication, that the more research that I do and the more companies that I'm talking to, right? Just in the last 2 years, I started asking the question, do you talk to your peers about their growth strategy? Do you talk to your peers about the growth strategy of your company? Or are all of you just working the best that you can, working the hardest that you can, working the most efficiently that you can? And you're all think you're working toward the same goal, but are you? I don't know if you are. And so I can tell you that when we don't talk about things on our team, we all have the best intentions, yet our intentions may not be moving in the same direction. And so the more we talk about what is our growth goal. So let's talk about the Voice of Bold Business Radio right now. One of our growth goals is to expand our existing market. We want to take the Voice of Bold Business Radio and we want more people to listen to it. That's what we want. We know that the information here is useful, it's relevant, it's also timeless. So you can come back to it any time and get ideas of how to tackle a problem. So we are developing the product, right? The Voice of Bold Business continues to evolve. We're going to hone in what content we do, how we present it. And we're going to do that and get really good at it. And we're all on the same page. And inside Red Direction, the Voice of Bold Business team, we are talking about what does that look like on a regular basis. We want to expand listenership. So we want to penetrate our market more. And so the actions that we take for distribution, the way that we talk about it outside of our team, the marketing that we do to get in front of new potential listeners is all directed at that. And those are our two priorities. We could add more stuff, right? We could add a show. We could add a second show of a whole different topic about business. We could. And in our case, thinking about time, knowing that the more we focus on one or two things, the more traction we can take and make, the farther we can go, the deeper we can work and run with it, which means more results will come from it. That's what we're working from. And so our decision for the next 2 years at the Voice of Bold Business Radio, it's all about product development. How can we continue to make the show better and continue to make it timeless and be the resource that it is for you, as well as market penetration, getting more listeners, right? One of the things, and I'm just going to put it out here, that we're going to start doing is saying, hey, who do you know that would benefit from leveraging time? Because tell them about this show so that they can come hear and listen as well. Because that Ansoff matrix, just saying those two things was so clarifying. And it's hard to make decisions in business, and it's hard to make quick decisions in business. It's harder to say, I'm only going to do this, right? We all, in some capacity, struggle with the want and desire to be liked by everybody. Well, here's the thing. When we know our growth strategy, we want to know and be liked by everybody in the bucket that we can serve instead of everybody in the world. So we still have the capacity to grow and expand, yet we have the freedom to not worry about everybody, only the people that we can serve and how can we serve them the best possible. So there is freedom in closing it down, not being everything to all people. And if we're not talking to each other within our organizations about our growth, we're probably tending toward, and in my experience and seeing in companies, definitely spreading a little too thin. Are you all in? And if you're all in, then what? Right? Talk about it. that next step. Of course I'm all in. Scott might say, of course he's all in. Eva might say, of course I'm all in. But what are we all into? Unless we actually say we're all into expanding the market for voice of bold business radio by honing and developing our radio program, right? That's our growth strategy. That's ensuring the future of the voice of bold business radio, to continue to expand, to continue to make it worthwhile, right? Both time-wise and monetarily, to continue to provide this out to the world. Out to, not the world, haha, look at that, I even caught myself, everything to all people, to the business owners that are interested in learning about growth, are interested in understanding what might be happening and how we may go about doing what we're doing in a different way, with a different perspective, so that we have the dimensional leadership that we're looking for, that we may have within our organization, but we can always benefit from more. We can always benefit from listening to other people. All right, which brings us to those two things. How do we prioritize? And by the way, we prioritize what we value. So if we value results at all costs, we're going to get those sales, or we're going to get that new client. What if we value integrity at all costs? We're going to make sure that whatever integrity means to you, so some words that might fit into that would be quality control, consistency, right? Those things take top priority, and everything we do revolves around those, even if it means taking a little more time. At all costs, we will do what we say we're going to do, and whatever else you define integrity to be. So when you know what you value personally, and you know what your company values, maybe it's what they've written down in their values. Maybe it's not. That's a whole other radio program that we could do. And in fact, we've talked about that in a radio program or two already, knowing what we value and how do we value. Because the actions that we take prioritize what we value. I mean, that's just really what it comes down to. So we have this concept of, we want to stay in business. Well, good. So have a growth strategy. Yes. Which means communicate. Yes. By the way, communication happens to be a value of a lot of companies out there. I mean, it's one of the most popular values that there is. With integrity, both of those make that top list. And so I question and I look for when walking into companies and doing some observation, and the questions that I ask to learn about an organization include the types of communication that I see versus the values that may be on the wall, maybe written down, maybe on the website, but are out there. They're part of that process. They're part of what's happening. Because when we can align what we value to the actions that we take, and the actions that we take align to our growth strategy, we now have our own unique recipe to leverage time and get the results that we want within that time. I'm talking about a few things, and some questions have come in. So we're going to change up the flow just a little bit today. We're going to change up the flow, and we're going to bring in a question right now because it's relevant and it's perfectly timely. So Paul wrote to us at radio@reddirection.com. He says, here's my problem. As you said, we're responsible for our actions, but I keep adapting and compromising because I try to be accountable for my efforts, including time management. And I feel abused because of my responsibility. So, what actions can I take to change this current situation? Oh, hang on. Then he added, okay, I feel abused because I'm always the responsible one. Okay, so this could be its own show too. I mean, in reality. So Paul, I hear your problem. I hear a lot of empathy, and I hear a lot of support. And I hear a lot of, you seem to know what you want. But my first question to you to consider, Paul, is, do you know what you want? What do you want from the role that you're in? And the second is, where are the edges of your role versus the edges of the roles that you are starting to be feeling abused about? Because it sounds like when you say you're always the responsible one, that you're covering for other people by taking on their work too. Or in teamwork, you're the one that ends up doing all the work and everybody else kind of skates a little bit. So first question, what do you want out of your role? Second question, where does the edge of your role end and the beginning of somebody else's role begin? And with the answers to those two questions, you can then look at the situation and say, here's really what's mine, and here's really what's not mine. Because until we know what's not ours, we may not be able to really focus on what is ours and do it well. I will tell you, one of the biggest things and the hardest things is to be the 11th hour savior. I do that naturally. It's one of those things that comes with the role that I'm in now, right? This creating Red Direction and being able to do this for people is because there are so many things that Jessica Dewell can do. And so how do you describe that to people? Well, until you start working with them, sometimes it's hard to describe. And what ends up happening is, regardless of the division of labor, I've been in several situations on teams before Red Direction, on teams at Red Direction, right, that I lead and I'm a part of, and then also in volunteer roles, right? We have all those things happening. And in all of those things, somebody doesn't get it done. Oh, this happened. Oh, that happened. Oh, I needed this. Oh, that was instead. Well, to make a deadline, like you, Paul, I'm somebody who says, when something says it's going to be done, it's going to be done. And if there are 5 people on the team and somebody doesn't do their job, I'll probably be the one that pulls an all-nighter, stays up late to make sure that the job gets done. And it is up to the integrity of with which was expected, delivered. And if it wasn't, stated to anybody my expectation and delivered on time to do what we said we were going to do. So that 11th hour thing gets me every time, still to this day. And in the grand scheme of things, it wears me down. It takes a toll. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm much more fulfilled for having done it. But I also know there's a flip side to that. And the flip side to that is, how do we ensure we're not making bad habits and becoming somebody that does get compromised, that does get walked all over? And that's where that concept of boundaries, Paul, comes in. And so when you know what you want from your role, and you know what the edges of your role, where your role stops and somebody else's role begins, it allows for more conversations to happen, more boundaries to be solidified, and even more importantly, the ability to navigate a potentially difficult situation, which it sounds like you're in. So find out those two things and then figure out what the hard conversation is to have, and pick somebody that you can talk to and have that hard conversation. Hey, my role ends here, but everybody else seems to think my role ends over here. And so am I in left field with this? Do I misunderstand my role? How can we change this because I'm feeling abused or compromised or walked all over, whatever the word is that feels good? Do your research and know what you want first, because without what you want and where you think the beginning and the edge of your role ends, it's all conjecture, and it all comes from heart. And business people, even the best of us that are heart-led, we tend to make decisions with our head when it comes to things like this. Can we quantify it? So figure out how to bring your heart and your head together in that conversation. All right, here, question from Gail using hashtag VBB Radio. Thanks, Gail, for listening live and jumping into conversation. Okay, Gail is asking, how do we avoid falling into a trap that comes from leveraging time efficiently without losing out on sustainable business growth? This is really important because, Gail, every single time we have something that's in or out, right? Something is in or something is out. Something is in or something is out. We are our interpretation of the action is almost as equally important as the action itself. Because here's what we've got. We want to grow, and here are our growth goals, and this is the way we're going to do it, and we're talking about it, and here's all of this stuff that the first part of the show was all about. But then, now we're thinking about time and how we use our time, and we get wrapped up into, well, I'm going to block out this much time, and it's going to take this much time, and what happens if it takes more time, and how do I make it up someplace else? So we're getting into efficiencies. And leverage time is an art. The ability to leverage time is not only the science of time management and the skill of time management, it is also the skill of prioritization and prioritizing the tasks to do. So Oh, I so wish, Gail, that you were, and maybe you are. If you're in Colorado, you check out some of our Twitter stuff that's happening. On March 12th, I will be talking to the Northern Colorado Manufacturing Association. And we are going to be talking about leveraging time that day. And we're going to be doing a couple of exercises that are going to be really key. And so I'm going to be a little bit of a spoiler and say one of those exercises is, how do you prioritize what actions will help you grow? And so when you know what actions help you grow, you prioritize and leverage your time and manage your time around that. Okay, let me say that differently because that was supposed to be the end of a sentence, but it apparently wasn't. So let's try this. Leveraging time combined with the key pieces of your growth strategy that have been defined, make sure those actions align. So that means when you know the 2 or 3 things, right? Like the Voice of Bold Business has 2 growth objectives that we're going to focus in. Anything outside of that is out. Who cares? Who cares what it is? Who cares what the opportunity is? Who cares if it's somebody that we love? All those things we do care. But when it comes to the decision making, the business, the growth, making sure that we get the growth, who cares? Nope, not us. They're out, 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 out. We're going to say no more to everything that's outside of the 2 things that are going to make the Voice of Bold Business grow. Which means the time that we then have to make the Voice of Bold Business grow expands. We have more space to decide what to do with that time to get more listeners and to hone in and continue to develop the show to increase its production value and timelessness. Okay. And that said, we're going to go right into our break. And right before we do, I want to just say, use email at reddirection.com. Use hashtag VBBradio. Join in this conversation. We want to know how you leverage time. We want to know how you leverage time in relationship to your growth strategy. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. Stay current and receive programs to continue sparking ideas about growth strategy by subscribing to the program at voiceofboldbusiness.com. Now, back to Jess.
Wow, what a great first half of the show. And just as much, time flies for me just as much when I am sharing the research that I've done for a program as much as when we have a guest on. And I just wish we had more time. So look at that, leveraging time. It's showing up in a whole different way. I wish we had more time. Here's the thing. The thing is, preparation is everything. And so we talked about, do we know our growth strategy? And are we talking about it to other people? And are the actions that we take in line with what we're talking about and our growth strategy? Because that's the first part really of leveraging time. That's kind of all of the pieces and how they fit together. That's the art, right? The science behind that, the skills that we can learn, which by the way are soft skills. They're not like typewriting. Oh, wow. I never even learned to type on a typewriter. I learned to type on a computer keyboard, whatever. Whether it was a skill of typing or maybe for me now it's using my thumbs. Whatever the hard skills are, learning how to use a piece of software, understanding the regulations of your industry, knowing what knowing what the going rate is or what's going on with your competitors and your customers. All of those things have processes that could be learned and followed. What we don't have that we must learn on our own, within our own work style, within our own personality, is the way that we do us and the way that we do our work. So our workflow matters. And so the skills that we bring in, when I talk about prioritizing, the skills that we bring in like that, those are soft skills. Elements of them are transferable, but the way we do it and the nuances that we can bring and the effectiveness we can have are ours and ours alone. And so let's talk about what is prioritizing, right? Prioritizing is something that we decide what's in and what's out, simplest form. And when we know what's in and we know what's out, all of a sudden, when 10 things come at us at once, or something blows up, or there's a big problem that arises, or all of a sudden growth happens really fast and you have 10 new mid-sized clients, or your email list, expansion is so big that your system is stretched, whatever that is, we have to respond. And when we know what's in and we know what's out, we can respond in nanoseconds. It's almost like as fast as we react to something that triggers us. Whoa, there was that cool ring on somebody's finger. I got to go figure out what stone that was, right? Shiny object syndrome. Hoo-hoo. But at the same point in time, it might also be all of a sudden I have so much stuff happening. I just don't even know what to do and I'm overwhelmed, right? So understanding what our priorities are means we can have a high level sifter. It's going to pull out the things we know don't belong there. And when we know what we want, it's easier to do. So when we know our personal values, we can say, here's what integrity means to us. Here's what communication means to us. At Red Direction, we've got a concept of advocate. Here's what advocate means to us. And my personal values, elegance. Here's what elegant means to me. And all of those things sit on top of whatever's going on. And actually, that's not true. They sit underneath. And then the things that might come through can come through. And now I automatically have less stuff to decide between, to choose between, to take action on. And I can prioritize a different way. So the first is, what do I value? The second part is, are they tasks that help me achieve my growth goals in my role and where I want to go? Are they things that help my company and my responsibility in the role that I'm in get to the growth goals of the company? And then we can filter everything through those as well. Everything that's left, we have a pretty good idea. So even though it might seem like a good idea, if it doesn't fit those two filters, might as well just leave it on the table for now. Doesn't mean there's not a place for it. It just means there's not a place right now when it is hitting the fan, honestly and truly. And so that's how we decide what's working or not, right? So if we do those things and we start taking action and we're not getting the results we want, well, it could be because our filter's not right? It could be we're still figuring out what the priorities are. So we go back to the communication. We go back to making sure we understand what's going on and how we work together. But maybe all those things are in place and we're still not getting results and it's still not working. Well, now this is a whole other kind of conversation to have. And this is a conversation of, will I take the time? Will I ask a team to take the time to understand why this isn't working? And if the answer is yes, great. There's an opportunity. There's some sort of priority around it. If the answer is no, it might need to be shelved or canned. Might need to just go in the bin. And that's the hardest thing ever. I'm reading a book about the myth of the nice girl. And in Myth of the Nice Girl, one of the things that she says was, she shares a story about a time she had to shelve one of her personal projects, her pet project. She came up with the idea within an organization. She got the buy-in from people. She went and got the funding for it, and it ran for 2 years, and it wasn't getting traction, and it wasn't making money. And then another idea had come along that was equally as good, but it was not hers. And she was the team leader. And she had to sit and think long and hard about, do I keep this project or do we stop this project so we can release funds for other projects that also have potential, that are already showing potential, or that have potential that's worth exploring when this pet project wasn't. And so to be able to cut loose and say, that's not working. It needs to be closed. That's not working. It's got to go on the shelf. That's not working. Close the doors and move on. There's something to be said for that. And by the way, there's an integrity in that. And by the way, there's an interesting communication that can occur from that and doing what we say we're going to do. And I really enjoyed that story because I know we all have stories like that when we had to say, for whatever reason, we had to stop doing something that we loved within our job, within our role, within our company that we were in charge of, a business that we owned, and put it away. And so when it's not working, it's not working. And it's okay to take some space to think about it. Then it's also okay to say, we're just done. This one's done. It's run its course. For whatever reason, wasn't the right time, wasn't the right place, wasn't the right market. Even though everything seems to have been in place, no results, and we're going to move on. Because when we beat our head against a wall, right, over and over and over again, when something's not working, we're taking up time and resources. We are letting our time be eroded. And so to leverage our time is to be able to say, that's not working. Just like being able to leverage your time is to say, nope, that opportunity sounds awesome. It's outside of the scope of what we're focused on for the next 18 months, 3 years, 5 years, whatever the case may be. And to be able to do this and do this well, right? A leader can do it, right? All of you listening, owners, company owners, all of you listening, parts of the executive team, you can do this. And this is a skill. This is an executive level skill that allows the discernment of working with more unknowns, because when everybody's aware of all of the unknowns that business works in every single day, it can be overwhelming. So it's very compartmentalized, and then it's less on the bottom, right? Here's what we're doing, and this is the reason we're doing this, and this is how we can tell we're doing a really good job. In the middle, we still have those things, yet we have more factors and more levers that we can push and pull, and we're looking for. And there's a lot of budget related things that come into that as well. We own a line in the budget. Maybe we own more than one line in the budget. Maybe we own the entire budget. Whatever the case may be, we're looking at our expenses, we're looking at our income, and we're looking at how not only we want to work with and make the most of our resources and allocate those correctly and advantageously. We want to think about the time that goes into that as well. And we must protect our time. Our time to think, our time to explore, our time to evaluate, because just like firing people, shutting down a project or a product is a hard thing. And sometimes when we shut down a product, it shuts down our relationships with strategic partners. It shuts down the ability to have a position for a person that was in that position, and there's nowhere else for them in the company, so they end up going, right? It could include culling people that go with culling product or projects. And that's hard. And none of us like to do it. However, when we have time to really think through it and we understand, we've taken time that we've protected to explore all of the options to get to a hard decision, allows us to be more prepared to have conversations with the key people in each of those areas. Another thing is it also allows us time to recognize what we don't know, and we can ask more information before we make a decision on a great new opportunity. Let's say an opportunity comes in and it's right on the line. We can see it, and maybe, we can see that this opportunity is high value, has a lot of potential results, and yet there's something nagging at us. It's like, I'm not so sure. I don't want to make that financial investment. We don't really want that capital expenditure. We don't want to wait 3 years to see results, or whatever it is, right? We can talk ourselves out of things very easily. The thing is, we can also talk ourselves into things without looking at the risk as well. And so protected time is also a way to evaluate opportunities in that capacity as well. And I had a story this morning, and I had a story 5 minutes ago. However, it has left my ears and has floated up in a bubble into the room. So provided I can remember the story, we'll come back to that within the program. We talked about the skill of prioritization, being able to discern what to do and what not to do, being able to discern, is it the right thing right now in this place? And within that skill of prioritization, summed up in the way that it works, are 2 other skills. Observation, right? Sit back, keep your mouth closed, hear, see, experience what's going on around. Also, it comes from confidence. Confidence is a soft skill, and how we get our confidence is through past wins, and how we have eroded confidence every day is by past losses or our inability to reconcile and learn from the results that were not optimal and they're holding us back somehow. And so the skill of confidence is more than just being able to make a decision or have guts or whatever other words you might put with that, ego in some capacity. It's also about the willingness to sit with yourself. Do you really know yourself? And that's also part of this protected time. If we don't know ourselves and we're not taking the time to just be with ourselves, do we even like us, right? We might like us, but we might not like us today. And Here's a side story. I'm working on a mental mastery program, right? Self-development for me includes active participation in different ways. Well, I'm in this program and in this program, one of the exercises was to just sit with yourself for 20 minutes. And what it came out of that time, the period of time that I was doing that was, I was like, oh, I really like myself. How cool is that? And then the next session was to just notice patterns of what's around you. And I noticed there were a lot of patterns that made me kind of grouchy, that made me kind of sad. And I would be in this experience of doing this work, right? And this stuff was coming out. And I'm like, how can I like myself? And all this crap is all over the place here. And so I found that I was tickled by that because I'm like, yeah, got it. There's a place that I have been forgetting, right? I've been forgetting me in a lot of cases. So while I like me, I'm not fully utilizing me. And that's where some of these skills that wrap up into prioritization come in handy, right? I was practicing my observer skills. And in this case, I was observing myself. How many of us take the time to actually just sit and observe ourselves, right? Throughout the day. And I don't necessarily think it has to be forever, but it has to be something to be able to do and check in a little bit. And then if I am lacking confidence, could it be from what I'm observing or not observing? Could it be from my past results? Could it be that I haven't written down my successes and I'm always experiencing something different, so I don't remember my successes? But maybe that means I also don't remember my failures. So am I actually learning from what was in the past? All hypothetical things that are questions hypothetical to you because you must ask those of yourself. If I ask you of those of me, they become hypothetical. But when you ask them of yourself, you have the chance to see more, experience more, understand what makes up your confidence, and then what you can do to increase your confidence or temper your ego or change habits that actually might be sabotaging the results, even though you have confidence. All right. I'm thinking about a lot of other things. I want to pause though. I'm going to pause right now because we have a couple of questions that have come in. The first two questions are from Stu. And Stu is asking us using hashtag VBB Radio. Question 1, does business growth have to include some form of innovation? Okay, part 1. Does business growth have to include some form of innovation? Well, if you talk to one of our past guests, Scott, maybe you can remember his name because I'm in the middle of this and I can't remember his name. Scissor guy. Nix. I don't remember. Mr. Nix. We're going to call him Mr. Nix. And it's the Nix scissors or something like that. Do you remember? Thank you, Wayne. Wayne Nix. He took a whole bunch of tools that were already existing and made something brand new that would serve his industry. So that, that is a form of innovation, but there's a cost to that. The cost is getting the buy-in. Is it really relevant? How will the people using it like the way that the people who were paying for it? Or will the people using it like the product as much when it is made to the specifications of the people that will pay for it? All kinds of fun, different things like that. So no, business growth does not have to include innovation. In fact, my first business and my husband's first 2 businesses were not innovative. We copied somebody else's business model. And in fact, so our first company was e-commerce. Well, there were e-commerce companies before us, PayPal, eBay, right? And Digital River existed. The people who eventually acquired our company, Digital River, they were in business before we were. So we joined an emerging market and we did the same thing that everybody else did with our own flair, with our own focus in a specific market and with our own way of doing things that allowed us to not only get market share, but to grow market share. So that's something that I want to put out there. And so we don't have to innovate to grow, which I think is fascinating. And the Voice of Bold Business falls into that category, by the way. Radio has existed forever. Internet radio has existed a lot longer than the Voice of Bold Business. We are using that as a platform to extend our reach, to provide a service in a specific way. So we're not innovating. We're using something that somebody else innovated or somebody else is building on to reach the people that we want. So we're using it as a platform instead of a technology that's built on. So I find that fascinating. And that was a long answer, and it might sound convoluted, but the point is no. Your company doesn't have to innovate to grow. They can expand and get better at the skill, get better at the service, get better at the thing that you do really well. All right, second question from Stu. Does fast growth stifle innovation? That's a loaded question. Actually, they both were loaded, so they were really good questions. This one, the answer is no. It depends on what you want to innovate. I mean, do you want to innovate the next step of what you're doing for growth, or do you want to create something brand new, innovation that doesn't exist yet? And in either case, growing fast doesn't necessarily stifle innovation. It stifles how fast innovation can occur. So being able to, people say fail fast, being able to have trial and error, run experiments, and be willing to learn and be dispassionate about the outcome, knowing that you're trying to get to a certain place, is really important. And that's a part of innovation. And so if you have, where it becomes dangerous, one of the places it can become dangerous is when the founders or the executive team still are the salespeople, and they're also the ones that are making decisions about how to scale. So if sales are going great and there's all kinds of things and everybody's wrapped up in sales, but nobody's thinking about scaling, I don't think it stifles innovation, it stifles growth. If everybody's focused on innovation and what are we going to do next and how are we going to improve our product in one of the 4 areas, market penetration, product development, market development, diversification, and they're not selling, well, then they're not going to grow fast unless they're still really lucky. And it's still going to stifle innovation in the sense that there's not going to be sales to fund future experiments to get better in doing what you do. So that's one perspective of one place to start with each of your questions, too. All right, we have a question from Catherine. Jess, what are your favorite leveraging time tactics that help you grow your business? I saved this one for last, Catherine, because it would be the present retreat. And the present retreat is something, when I talked about protected time earlier in the program, that's what it is. It's time that I have carved out that is a space just for the things that I want to think about, that I want to dream about, that I want to do specifically in relationship to all of Red Direction and the products that we have within Red Direction, right? The Voice of Bold Business Exchange, the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the roundtables, our dimensional leadership programs, things like that. And so what their growth strategies are, what the growth strategy of Red Direction as a whole is, are we doing well or not? Are we on time, right? Deadline, are we meeting our deadlines or not? So I'm in the really big stratosphere at this particular moment, Catherine, because a lot of us think that we can do time management techniques and be able to get better at prioritizing, and that's not true. The way we get better at prioritizing is when we shift our focus and turn everything on its head, and we say, we know there's only a certain amount of time. We know we're being pulled in every direction. And even though all that's happening, I'm protecting a block of time where I can look at everything and sit with everything and evaluate opportunities and evaluate, are we on track with our growth plan? Are we on track with our revenue so far? What are some of the other things that are going on? And then, of course, time management tools that I like. I'm a big fan of Asana. Some people say asana. It is a yoga pose. So we've got Asana as a tool that I really like to leverage time, because now we can see all of the people that are involved in a project. What is the flow of the work that must be done? And then be able to work backward to, if this is when something goes out or must be done or delivered, we can work backward. Who are the pieces in place, and when is it necessary that those pieces get done so that the piece after it can happen and we can still hit our deadline? So I'm a big fan of that from a time management perspective. Other than that, it's sticky notes. And so if you like technology, Trello keeps general big projects moving through. Kanban is another view that allows projects. I use sticky notes on a board in my office. So I visually look at some of those things because that's how I do me. But there's so many tools out there. I know you'll be able to find one. I don't really look at asana or my sticky notes, though, when I'm in my present retreat. In my present retreat, I'm taking the time to just be with what is, accept what is, understand what was set, right? What is our strategic plan? How does our growth strategy fit into that? And are we on track with that? And what conversations must occur to close those gaps? What skills must I acquire or people on the team, or do we outsource to get the skills we need to finish a project? And how do all of those pieces factor in? Because in the end, it's how we think about our company that will help us make the best decisions going forward to stay in line with our growth. And it's bold to carve out time. It's bold to protect that time and to think about everything in relationship of leveraging our time by what's in and out of our growth strategy, what's in and out of our revenue goals, and what's in and out of the actions to get us to our revenue goals to achieve our growth strategy. Because not very many people do it. It is a place where we make more time when we carve out time and we protect it for something incredibly important. And this present retreat is where we evaluate, where we dream, where we do what we do in the way that we do it. And we can find out what could we be doing better. And what are the bigger pieces in terms of communication, in terms of solidifying growth strategy, in terms of strategic partnerships to make sure that we're on track to achieve our growth strategy, which is something that is going to happen over the course of 3 years, 5 years, and beyond. Thanks for listening today. This is the Voice of Bold Business Radio, program 207, Leverage Time. You can find program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/p207. It's your turn to keep this conversation going. Continue using hashtag VBBRadio and use radio@reddirection.com to tell us your story, to tell us your experiences. And now that you've listened, wherever you are listening, whether that's iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube, one of the other many platforms that we distribute to, rate us. Rate the Voice of Bold Business Radio and leave us a review. Learn from what was shared today, the stories and the questions from others, and use it in your own practical application. And I will leave you with this question. How do you increase your organization's resilience? By leveraging time.
The Voice of Bold Business Radio gives you insights about how to achieve your company's growth strategy. Use hashtag VBBRadio or email us at radio@reddirection.com to ask questions and share your experiences. Add your voice to the conversation. Together, we define what being an effective leader means today. Special thanks to the Scott Treatment for technical production. Thank you for joining us.